Fenix Simulations has just dropped their long-awaited update regarding the A320 Block 2. Welcome aboard Flight Simmers, my name is Rowan and welcome back to another Information Alpha video. Today on the 13th of February, Fenix Simulations has just dropped a long 50-minute long video reviewing all of the work they have accomplished in the last 6 to 7 months. Now I know a lot of people are quite annoyed with Fenix because of how long this process has taken them, and they are sympathetic and understand these concerns. However, with what they have shown us, I think you can justify the time. So what we're going to do is basically summarize up this long 50-minute video into roughly a 10-minute video. So if you want to watch the full thing, we will leave a link down in the description. So starting off, we have a new PA system. Like with other aircrafts, when you're starting up the engines, it's going to start playing cabin announcements with your safety briefing and so on. Fenix Simulations has now implemented their own PA system, and it also comes with dynamic sounds. And what I mean by that is that depending on the camera location, the sounds is going to differentiate. So as you're moving through the cabin, you're going to hear the passenger announcement through the speakers louder as you travel closer to them. And just like in real life, when the cockpit door is shut, the sound is going to be very muffled. However, if you also want to listen to the cabin announcements, we can also use the ACP knob to listen to the PA in the cockpit. And then obviously, as I've mentioned before, they have this new cabin which they have now previewed to us. The whole thing has completely been revamped from the ground up. Everything has been remodeled and textured with brand new decals, and I have to say it all looks amazing. For example, the emergency exits with the illuminated exit signs, the leather, the stitching, or even the seat back pockets. All of it looks absolutely amazing. And relating to the cabin announcements, we can also have community modifiable sound packs as well for the PA system. Sticking around the cabin crew, we also have more ECAM synchronization implemented into the whole system. So before takeoff, when we have to get our cabin ready ECAM status, there are now two ways in which we can receive these now. The first one, of course, will be the simple cabin ready where the cabin crew would press a button, and then a second one would be where the cabin crew actually calls the cockpit via the phone and you can listen to them confirming cabin is ready for departure. Now moving away from the cabin now, we have full GSX integration and automations, well, meaning that the whole process from boarding to pushback should be automatic built into the Block 2 update, meaning that we don't have to keep opening and closing our GSX menu to do each individual stage. The boarding, the refueling, the pushback, all of it should be seamless, which is very exciting. And then coming back to the cockpit, not relating to the Airbus systems but to do with the EFB, we have a bunch of new updates. In fact, they've revamped the whole EFB, including more apps and settings for us to choose from. For example, failures, a new evac mode, or even then the linking of Navigraph to the performance data now is going to take Navigraph data, for example runway lengths or taxiways and such, in reference to our aircraft performance data. And now for those who have been asking for it, you can now send your EFB performance data directly to the McDo for those who do not like looking back and forth typing in that data. Now more towards the actual Airbus systems, we have a new side stick damping simulation, or SDS, which basically increases the inertia and the feeling of the aircraft, so it's not going to feel very rigid. The whole movement between full deflections is going to be much smoother, leading to a smoother flight. There's also been a lot of VNAV tuning, especially when it comes to idle descent. So when we are descending utilizing VNAV, it's not going to rapidly descend, it's going to be a lot more accurate to what it is in real life. Now they still admit it's still not perfect, however they say it is much better compared to what it previously was. Another part with the internal systems is with the flap tuning. They have tuned the flaps in terms of how the aircraft is performing, especially on final approach and landing. So when it comes to the flare, with the flaps, it's not requiring you to flare as aggressively, which then leads to floating. So overall, whether if your flaps free or full, it should lead to a much smoother landing with a reduced amount of floating. And now we come to the engine systems, which I think is the most interesting part about this video. Now of course we've got the updated IAEs, which we are very excited to see, but inside of these IAEs comes a lot of systems which has not been created on any flight sim before. So for starters, they explain about the oil pressures of how as the temperature is increasing or decreases, the viscosity would affect the performance of different stages within the engine. For example, once it gets really hot, the viscosity reduces, therefore it's travelling a lot faster, creating a buildup of oil in certain areas of the engine. And then because of that, we will see a noticeable change in oil pressure in the cockpit. And also relating to the temperature within the engine, if we're pushing the engine too much and essentially overheating it, they have simulated instances such as compressor stalls, the overheating which could lead to the engine completely locking up inside. And now moving on to the ground with the engines, specifically with the IAEs, we have the start procedures of hot weather climates. So if the climate is an environment which is over 40 degrees Celsius and you have a fast turnaround, the engines are basically going to be very warm from its previous flight. And what that means is that the engine start procedure completely changes because the FADEC systems is going to try to protect the engines from overheating. So what this essentially means is that when the engine is very hot, it can't efficiently ignite without causing potential damage, and therefore we have to cool the engine down. And how we do that is by using the official procedures such as cranking the engine to introduce fresh cool air inside of the engine, and then afterwards doing a manual crank start. Now Amir does an excellent job explaining this using documentation which they have taken from Airbus, so please make sure you check that out if you are interested in that. Another part which they are trying to look into in the future is aging of the engine. So as the engine starts to age more and more, it becomes less efficient, meaning that it's going to burn at higher temperatures and require slightly higher fuel flow. And with that, that means that every single flight will be slightly different in engine performance, so every single flight will not be the same due to the aging of the engines. They have said that this is something which they would be interested in looking into the future, but is not included in this next build. Next up, we have probably the coolest system which they have simulated, and that's all to do with the fan blade icing. So just like any environment, when it's cold outside and it's raining or you've got moisture, it's going to ice or freeze up. And this is exactly the same which still occurs inside of engines, even though it is a very warm environment. So to summarise what exactly they have done is that when the engine is idling and you are exposing it to harsh weather such as freezing rain, what's going to happen is that ice is going to start building up on the fan blades inside of the engine where the air is being forced through, such as the different vents or fins, and what's going to occur is that it's going to disrupt the airflow of the engine, basically breaking that laminar flow. And what that could lead to? Well, let's look at this video.
We're cleared for takeoff, and let's just advance the thrust levers. And yeah, look at that. So it's probably a good thing I'm stood on the brakes because that does not look very healthy. Now the question is, why just engine number 2? Surely if it's icing everything up. Now, if you cast your mind back to the whole short, when I mentioned the wind conditions, you'll remember I said we had a quartering headwind from right to left. As it was though, on the whole short itself, the wind was a direct right to left crosswind due to the orientation of the aircraft. And what ended up happening was poor old engine number 2 was sat out there in the wind, cold, and elements, while engine number 1 was actually being shielded by the fuselage, and therefore it did not have a bunch of precipitation blowing into it.
Very scary stuff, right? And this can occur quite easily when exposing the aircraft into harsh conditions, so all we have to do to fix this is by increasing our RPM every 15 minutes as specified by Airbus, and this should prevent engine fan blade icing. Now the other cool part which they demonstrated is compressor stalls. So kind of similar to the fan blade icing but minus the icing, when you're introducing strong winds, especially a direct crosswind between 40 and 50 knots, what's going to happen is that when the wind impacts on the side of the engine, it's going to disrupt the laminar flow going inside of the engine, which will then be used to combust, and because of that it can lead to a compressor stall due to the loss of that laminar flow. So let's give it a listen in this demonstration.
Alright, final one, as this video is starting to get very long and I'd quite like to get some sleep. We're here in Edinburgh, it's wet, it's windy, and it's kind of wild. We'll keep this one short as I think this phenomenon is quite well understood. We've got a massive crosswind, 45 to 50 knots blowing from left to right, well outside of aircraft limitations, and I shouldn't really be here. But in the words of William Ernest Henley, I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul, and I am the captain of this damn airplane, so I've decided we're going anyway. Everything all set, let's stand on the brakes and apply a bit of power. Yeah, that sounded kind of expensive, and it also probably scared the life out of most people in the back.
The last part with the internal side of the Fenix is to do with the McDo. More specifically, they have now introduced a web version, meaning that we can externally control the McDo from our phone or iPad. So that's very exciting news to see, because previously it was all locked up due to their licensing. And then finally, more to do with the actual company itself. Fenix is now changing their licensing so that they can be partnered with ProSim, which focuses on third-party hardware such as the Mini FCU, so compatibility with these types of products will now be available. As for the release of the Fenix Block 2, it is still unknown. They're still trying to focus on the small bugs and stuff and get through the testing, but hopefully with this video it should indicate that it is fairly soon. And that's it for the Fenix Block 2 update. Once again, this is a revised video of what they recently released, so if you want to watch the full thing yourself, I have linked it in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you do click on that like, subscribe, and ding dong that notification bell. And if you want to get more involved with the community, you could join our Discord, which is also linked below. Thank you so much for watching. My name's Rowan, and you've been watching Information Alpha. See ya!